So it's a very cold weekend in Warsaw right now. I haven't done a video for a few months. I kind of entered a new chapter in my life and decided to stop trying to get my coaching project off the ground. And also, it really just felt right to take some time for myself. Self being the key word there. You know, I always used to think that I was being myself when I wasn't. And then I've had a series of very powerful experiences where I felt like I totally discovered myself each time. So it's not so much like an on-off switch, but more like a multi-directional spectrum. It's kind of like how the universe starts off really small and then expands, and not only expands into something, but also creates the space into which it expands. So our personalities start off as echoes of our parents and expand into a voice that has never been heard before. Or certainly that's the potential which lies within every human being. Now, I've read quite broadly during my time. There are some Eastern Orthodox mystics who, in contrast to the way things were in the West, where people generally had very defined categories, so this is what it is to be human, this is what it is to be divine. They talked of theosis, of becoming divine, and in doing so, becoming truly human. Things weren't set, they were moving in one direction or another. So they saw people as beings of unlimited potential. Now, I realize this is a very esoteric introduction to a video. And if you weren't prepared to listen to something deep, your brain has probably crapped itself already. So let's take a step back and try to break this down. So what is the self? Well, I think a lot of people are living from a place of a false self. When we're children, we need to scream and shout and be selfish and push the boundaries. And these are just normal stages of development which a person must pass through. But if a parent doesn't have their own life together, they can start competing in that space of needing to scream and shout. And then not only does the child scream, but so does the parent. And the parent is like a god to a small child. They're all powerful. The child is completely dependent on them. So if a child is crying and the parent is screaming at the child might cry some more to voice its displeasure and uncomfortableness, but eventually it realizes quite intelligently, my survival is at stake here. If this godlike being rejects me, I'm going to die. And so it learns to comply. And also children are very egotistical. That means they think the whole world revolves around them, and that's not a criticism in any way. That's just how it is when you can't tell the difference between yourself and others. But when they feel this rejection, they feel it like it's something wrong with them. The gods are angry with me. It must be because there's something wrong with me. And I must appease them. I must work hard because I'm not okay as I am. And so instead of developing into a full self, the child develops a false self, a compliant persona that will at least shut up and ensure survival. And so compliance and not expression becomes the norm. And similarly into adulthood, in our past, we lived in small tribes and we needed to make sure that we continue to be accepted by our tribe, because if our tribe cuts us off, we're going to die. And this is why very naturally we care what other people think. And this has been commercialized and self-weaponized against us by harnessing this tribal instinct into finding validation in how many likes or comments our last post or picture got. But the message is the same. Your survival depends on what other people think of you. And to the extent that we're shackled by this, we're never really free. Now, this might sound surprising to some of you, but I used to be a very closed person. Other than a few outbursts in specific areas of my life where it felt safe to do so, I kept my cards close to my chest. I operated on the unconscious assumption that I had to work twice as hard as anyone else just to be okay. The people closest to me in life were people who repeated this message to me, and I worked damn hard for their approval. And I might occasionally be granted it, but the promise of it seemed to motivate me more than actually receiving it. And so it felt like I was locked inside a prison for the first 30 years of my life or so. But I was never a really quiet inmate. This is, like I said before, it's not a binary yes or no. Several years ago, when I was living in England, I started volunteering at a dog rescue. I would go there every Saturday and Sunday morning to help walk the dogs. And it brought joy to my heart, but it came from a place of utter despair in every other area of my life. I felt like I would be a disappointment to everyone I loved. So I felt like if I can't help but be a disappointment to the people I love, what good can I do in this world? And so I logically thought, okay, I can't please other human beings. I'm going to do something good for animals. It wasn't the best mindset to have, but I truly believe that people's true colours are shown at their worst possible moments. And I'm proud of who I was in those moments and what I was trying to do, even if imperfectly. So, although there was something true in me there, the prison doors were still quite shut. It was only when I started going to therapy, kind of by accident, because I believed there was something wrong with me, because I felt the need to talk about the things that really bothered me, and I was told by the woman I loved that this was unacceptable. Only then did my life start to be turned around, and the shame I felt began to be deconstructed. I realized that speaking up wasn't a bad thing to do. I began to voice my opinions and feelings. I discovered dance, which was the first place that I felt like I could really be myself. And the areas of life where I felt like I could be myself continued to expand as time went by, and I worked through my issues. However, one thing to note here is that certainly a mistake I made, and a mistake other people I'm sure will make, is that if you try to do this, being your true self, while you still feel the need for everyone to like you, you're going to be in a world of misery, because not everyone will like you. I mean, some people are just not ready. Some people are just not ready for someone like the real you in their lives, and they may never be. Mark Manson coined the phrase, "If it's not a hell yes, it's a no." Now, he was talking about dating, which is why if I ask a girl out and she's like, maybe, I know it's pretty much not worth it. But I think it applies to all sorts of relationships. I have a large group of friends and acquaintances. I'm kind of a big deal. People know me. Forgive the Anchorman reference. If you haven't seen that movie, you need to watch that movie urgently. Anyway, people naturally move closer and further depending on a variety of factors. And simply by letting this happen, I've not so much a social circle as a social spiral. And the people who are closest to me are those that I can trust with everything, who get to see sides of me that aren't available to the general public. And then there's those people I meet and have fun with, but I'm not especially close to. And then further away, the people who I'm not close to, but I just have good civil relations with. And from time to time, people move in different places in that spiral. They change positions. And I think life is enjoyed best not just by being yourself, but also by letting people be who they need to be in relation to you. If you put a huge amount of energy and spend many years perfecting it, you might be able to get lots of people to kind of like you. But they can't really love you, because they won't know you. They won't see the real you to know and love. Changing from this closed person to becoming a much more open person was definitely the right thing for me to do, and more in line with who I feel I truly am. And it was and is pretty exciting. You know, a whole new world of enjoyment and life was opened up to me. And I couldn't help but share that excitement. But it was right for time. And Now, as Facebook reminds me of my old posts, I look at them even from 1 or 2 years ago and I think, wow, my thinking has changed a lot. Even in this embrace of my feelings, I used to be so in my head, which was understandable. I had a lot to process. But now I'm much more instinctual. The need to define and describe my feelings is less. But though it's something I'm still capable of doing. Knowing yourself is the beginning of wisdom, and knowing and observing your thought processes allows you to call bullshit on yourself when you know that a certain pattern of thought is not serving you. And I think that this was my time where I got to push the boundaries and be loud and shout and scream. Even though I didn't really shout and scream, it was a time that I had to go through to become who I am now. So like I said, now a new chapter has started. I'm spending much more time enjoying my own life, realizing that I must take care of myself before I'm capable of taking care of others, which is something I've found to be slightly different than trying to do both at the same time. I'm still a very open person, but I feel like the journey from here is less likely to help anyone get out of the mud, because I feel like no part of me is really stuck in the mud anymore. You know, I was walking through a corridor of a dance school last week after a practice. We're not allowed to call them parties, it was a practice. But I was completely on my own, and I just began to observe my breathing. It was slow and calm, and I observed my posture. It was completely upright and proud, and I just felt this sense of contentment. I didn't have to adjust anything. I was just being. You know, maybe I accidentally achieved nirvana or something, who knows. But the need to be accepted and the rebellion against it have both disappeared largely. I mean, I can never say completely, but they're not a major factor in my life anymore. There's no fear or pain in being alone. To refer back to that tribal instinct, I can now be outside of the tribe and nothing bad happens. And I've got so much experience of nothing bad happening that I don't fear anything anymore. I said earlier that to the extent that you're shackled to other people's approval, you're not free. My wish for all of you is that you're able to deconstruct your own shackles in whatever way works best for you. That you realize that nothing bad happens if the tribe doesn't like you. And that you find yourself free. Finding a universe full of potential in your heart. And the willingness to see what beautiful thing it'll expand into. Thank you for listening.